Hello everyone. The topic of our presentation is on the social impact of echo chambers and information cocoons. As for the introduction part, I will firstly go through the definitions of the information cocoons and the echo chamber, and then we'll have our hypothetical social impact. And then we have two case studies to show if there are any evidence to support our hypothetical social impact, and we'll have our conclusions as well. So in the last part, we will have our thesis statement, which gives our conclusion and extension. For the definition of the echo chamber, it is mainly discussed in the realm of news media that beliefs of the audiences are amplified or reinforced by communication and repetition in a closed system. In this way, there might be potentials that our audiences are insulated from the rebuttal voices, since they are constantly getting the information that suit their own preferences. So for information cocoons, it's basically the same thing. When people are searching information online, they are constantly being recommended by the similar informations. So in this way, people are harder and harder to get the information of different kinds, and it's harder to see the outside world. So information cocoons may be formed, and people may be blocked from the outside world by algorithms. Okay, so how actually these two terms works? We have to look at the filter bubble, which contains mainly two parts, the self-selected and pre-selected personalization. So for the self-selected personalization, it concerns situations in which people choose to encounter like-minded opinions exclusively. So people tend to avoid information that challenges their point of view. And for the pre-selected personalization, this is different because it is not a result of users' direct choice, but of a choice that is determined by algorithms. So let's look at an example. So this figure shows the recommendation network of a science article. As you can see here, the part A is the screenshot of an article's webpage from Science. And below we have several lists of recommended articles with hyperlinks embedded. So each time when a reader clicks on the hyperlink, the walking time is recorded by the algorithm by 1. So the more times you click on the hyperlinks, the more walking times the algorithms will record. And for the part B, as you can see, it is the sample of collected science recommended networks, and each node in the map is an article, and each direct link is a hyperlink. The sizes of the nodes are proportional to the logarithm of visiting frequencies of the random walk. So in this way, a recommendation network of articles are formed. So let's look at the closer mechanism of the recommendation network. So in the part A, as you can see here, illustrates the flexible recommendation strategy, where the target object randomly recommends L objects from a pool of lambda L most similar ones. And for the part B is the navigability of the 4 derived recommendation networks with different lambda. And for C, most importantly, it is the heat maps for retrieval accuracy in the lambda t-plane. So the black solid curves mark the area with improved accuracy, and the red dashed lines indicates the optimal lambda subject to the highest accuracy. So as you can see here, as the walking time increases, which means as the more hyperlinks you clicked, the flexibility also increases. The more recommendation the algorithm will give you with higher and higher accuracy. Therefore, the information cocoons may be formed, that people are constantly getting informations that are similar and suits their own preferences, and gradually they may be blocked from the outside voices and the outside opinions as well. So Negroponte in 1995 wrote that imagine a future in which your interface agent can read every newswire and newspaper and catch every TV and radio broadcast on the planet, and then construct a personalized summary. This kind of newspaper is printed in an edition of 1. In this way, we have our hypothetical social impact. The first one is the polarization on political opinions, which we'll then discuss in our case study 1. And the second hypothetical social impact is reinforcing social framing effects and social sorting, which we'll then discuss in our case study 2.
So I will discuss a case study about the echo chamber and the political communication. So this study is mainly focused on the retweeting behavior on Twitter. So the authors mainly investigated whether there are echo chambers in the retweeting by liberals and conservatives, which are two ideology groups. And they investigated this relating to 12 events, and 6 of those events are political and the rest are non-political. And the retweeting behaviors are generally considered as self-selection instead of pre-selection personalization. And the authors also investigated the effect of echo chamber on the polarization of the discussion of those 12 events. And the polarization is determined by those 3 matrices shown here. So first, the authors investigated whether there are echo chambers in retweeting. So this figure here shows a correlation between the ideology of the retweeter and the ideology of the authors of the contents. And if there is indeed echo chamber, then people should be more likely to retweet contents posted by authors with a similar ideology. And this should be reflected by the red lines on the figures. And the shaded areas on the figure shows that there are retweeting at that specific retweeter ideology level and the author ideology level. And this figure here shows the correlation regarding the 6 political events. And we can see that the trends of the gray areas indeed follow the red lines. Also, the gray area seems to aggregate into 2 clusters. One at the top right corner and one at the bottom left corner. And this shows that there are indeed more retweets within the ideological groups, and which makes there are indeed echo chambers. However, the echo chambers is not that prominent regarding the 6 non-political events. So here we see that the gray areas aggregate at the center of the graphs, and their trends do not really follow the red lines. So this indicates that there are more cross-ideological interactions regarding non-political events. And the authors then investigated the effects of echo chamber on the polarity of discussion. So they found that generally, political events discussions are more polarized than the non-political events discussions. So this reflects a correlation between the degree of echo chamber and the polarization of the discussion. And if there is indeed a causal relationship, so this means that the echo chamber could indeed affect the polarization. However, there are 2 exceptions here, which are Newtown shooting and Syria. So these 2 events are non-political, but they have higher level of polarization compared than the budget and marriage equality, which are political events. The authors also found that the polarization level can change over time. So for instance, for the Newtown shooting, which are the purple line here, so its level of polarization increased over time. And actually, this correlates with the change of the discussion from this tragedy to the gun control policy, which is more political, which means it will have a higher degree of echo chamber. So this further verifies the correlation between degree of echo chamber and the polarization of the discussion. However, the effects of echo chamber are not the same in different ideological groups. So the author found that for the political events, which are shown at the top half of this figure, the liberals are more likely to break the echo chamber and do cross-ideological retweeting. And also, the author found that cross-ideological retweeting is more likely in non-political events, which are shown in the bottom half of the graph. And the differences between the cross-ideological retweeting between the liberals and conservatives are smaller for non-political events. So this shows that echo chambers could have different effects in different ideological groups. So to conclude, echo chambers can form by self-selection of contents to read. And however, pre-selected personalization may also play a role. And also, echo chambers are more prominent with the political topics and can cause polarization in the discussion. However, the effect of echo chamber is not very serious regarding non-political topics, so which means the effects of echo chamber are not that bad as what we previously thought.
This case study on the echo chamber effect on social media was carried out by Searancke et al. The paper explores the differences between popular social media platforms and how likely these platforms are in influencing the spread and formation of echo chambers. The authors carried out a comparative analysis of more than 100 million pieces of content about varying controversial topics that included gun control, vaccination, and abortion. The platforms studied were Gab, Facebook, Reddit, and Twitter. One dataset was chosen for each social media: abortion for Twitter, vaccines for Facebook, politics for Reddit, and Gab as a whole. For the analysis on the presence of echo chambers, two different aspects are needed to be determined. The first, whether there was homophily in the interaction networks, and the second, if there was bias in the information diffusion towards like-minded peers. Differences and homophily in the different social media platforms were investigated and presented in Figure 1. The figure shows the correlation between the leaning of a user and the leaning of their neighbour for the different media platforms. The topics of vaccines and abortion on Facebook and Twitter respectively show a strong correlation between the leaning of a user and the average leaning of their nearest neighbours. However, Red and Gab show a difference. The corresponding plots B and D in Figure 1 show a single bright area, indicating that users do not split into groups with opposite leaning but form a single community. In Reddit, this is biased to the left, and in Gab, it is to the right. The presence of homophilic interactions can be further confirmed in Figure 2, which shows the communities emerging for each social medium, arranged by increasing average leaning and community size. The presence of homophilic interactions can be further confirmed in communities on Facebook and Twitter, and show a whole spectrum of leanings, but with users with similar leanings forming different communities. Some communities on Facebook are characterized by a robust average leaning, and these results are in accordance with the observation of homophilic interactions. In comparison, communities on Reddit and Gab do not cover the whole spectrum and all show similar average leaning. The almost total absence of communities with leaning very close to zero further confirms the polarized state of the systems. Again, a distinction between Facebook and Twitter on one side and Reddit and Gab on the other can be seen. For the topics of vaccines and abortion, on Facebook and Twitter, users with a given leaning are much more likely to be reached by information propagated by users with a similar leaning. Conversely, Reddit and Gab don't show this effect. Furthermore, the average leaning in these media are not zero. These results, altogether, indicate that information diffusion is biased towards individuals who share a similar leaning in some social media, in particular Twitter and Facebook. In contrast, in others, Reddit and Gab, this effect is absent, which may be because of these platforms not bursting the echo chamber effects, or the dynamic observed in the study being all within a single echo chamber. To conclude, platforms organized around social networks, such as Facebook and Twitter, favor the emergence of echo chambers, while others, such as Reddit and Gab, do not. The study, by Searancke et al. In 2021, concluded that there were significant differences across platforms in terms of homophilic patterns in the network structure and biases in the information diffusion towards like-minded peers. Users of the platforms were found to prefer information adhering to their own worldview, ignore dissenting information, and form polarized groups around shared ideas.
Overall, we have discussed what an echo chamber is and the hypothetical impacts of one. Briefly put, an echo chamber refers to situations in which beliefs are amplified or reinforced by communication and repetition inside a closed system and insulated from rebuttal. Echo chambers may increase social and political polarization and extremism. We can conclude that the echo chamber does exist, but the hypothetical impacts of it was exaggerated, as shown in the previous case studies in the previous slides. Case study 1 showed us that echo chambers can form by self-selection of contents to read. However, pre-selected personalization performed by Twitter may also play a role in this. Also, echo chambers are more prominent with the political topics and can cause more polarization in the discussion. However, the effects of echo chambers are not that serious in non-political events, which means that the effects of echo chamber are not that bad as what we previously thought. Case study 2 showed us that some digital companies favor the emergence of echo chambers, while others do not. There were significant differences across platforms in terms of homophilic patterns in the network structure of certain platforms. Moreover, the filter bubble hasn't been widely used in the news media, and the current tech wasn't strong enough to really control people's opinions or really block their views, so they are still in their infancy. However, we still need to be careful about the potential impacts and take action before something really happens. On news sites, algorithmic personalization is still less prevalent. People generally have the choice whether they want to read online news, whether they want it to be personalized or not. Overall, there is no reason to worry about pre-selected personalization leading to bubble problems because the technology is definitely still insufficient. Consequently, algorithmic accountability through transparency becomes more and more important as the technology develops. In spite of any serious concerns voiced, at present, there is no empirical evidence that warrants any strong worries about filter bubbles. Thank you for listening.